that yet. Okay, that's okay. Um, so joints. Um, this is based on the textbook we used to use. So this. So some of the pictures in here are from that textbook. They're not from the OpenStax textbook that we're using now, but it doesn't matter. The information's the same. Okay, so the word articulation means joint. And if we say two bones articulate with each other, that means they are connected together at a joint, some kind of joint. And it can be two bones or cartilage and bone, as we'll see. And even the teeth in their sockets, that's considered to be a type of joint. And the teeth are held in their sockets by a bunch of little tiny ligaments. Hold them in there. So some joints provide movement. Some joints have little or no movement between the bones that are joined. And joints can be classified in different ways. One way of classifying them is by the degree of movement. So joints can be some joints could be described as immovable, some are slightly movable, and some are freely movable. Joints can also be classified by the type of tissue that binds them together. So it could be like thin. Some joints are held together by thin sheets of connective tissue, or some are held together by cartilage. Some are held together by ligaments. So fibrous joints held closely together by dense connective tissue. And some of these fibrous joints are immovable, like the sutures that hold the bones of the cranium together. Sutures that hold between the frontal bone and parietal, and between the left and right parietal. Those are sutures, and they're held together by this dense connective tissue. So thin layers of dense connective tissue, and these eventually they fuse together as one solid. Some are slightly movable. Some of these fibrous joints. So between the tibia and fibula here, there are sheets of connective tissue that hold these two bones together side by side. Down here, there's a slight bit of movement. There should be. This connective tissue can be torn, and these two bones can separate from each other. That would be a good thing. Does anybody know what that's called when those two bones? That injury is called. I just heard. I don't watch sports or anything, but I just recently I heard on the news on sports guy was talking about some. I don't know if it's a football player or basketball player. This often happens to basketball players. They have this. It's called a high ankle sprain. I'm not sure what the motion would be, but instead of a regular ankle sprain is down here, and the tarsal bones are the foot is twisted one way or the other, or down this way too far, and it overstretches the ligaments and partially tears them. But if it happens up here, it tears these two bones apart from each other. It's called a high ankle sprain. And that can be more serious. It can require surgery. Cartilaginous joints. Obviously, they're joints held together by cartilage. And an example is this pubic symphysis, this thin quarter-inch thick pad of cartilage between the left and right hip bones here, where they're connected to each other. That's only slightly movable, and it becomes more flexible during pregnancy. There's a hormone in pregnant women called relaxin, and it relaxes this joint. It makes this cartilage more flexible to allow for, especially for childbirth, for the baby to come out through the birth canal. Those hip bones can move a little bit relative to each other, can flex a little bit more. The intervertebral discs, also another cartilaginous joint, slightly movable between the vertebra and the one above it or below it. The disc is fibrocartilage, and each one is just slightly movable, but all because there's so many of them. Each one of them flexes a little bit. Your whole spine can twist too much. Synovial joints. So these are all the ones that are freely movable. The elbows, joints, knees, finger and toe joints. The bones are held together by ligaments, and it says the ligaments are continuous with the periosteum. What that means is so this is an arm, but the humerus, these bones are covered with periosteum. Periosteum is that thin layer of connective tissue that covers the bone. And that periosteum, it just continues at the end of the bone and just becomes ligament. The same material, that's dense connective tissue. The periosteum is just continuous with the ligaments, which are like ropes made of that same connective tissue. And that the ligaments just continue on onto the next bone, and then they just continue as periosteum on the other bones. So the periosteum and the ligaments are just continuous. The same material as connective tissue. Mostly collagen, strong collagen fibers. Ligaments limit the range of movement. So why can this, although it can only bend like this, it can't go beyond straight because of ligaments here that prevent it from hyperextending, bending beyond strength if they don't go this far. These ligaments can tear. They tell a story about the guy that I knew worked with me once, and he was on the track team doing through the distance, like a metal frisbee. He swung back one time and went the speed forward, and the ligaments ruptured. His arm bent backwards. I guess that's not funny. Except I didn't like him very much, so it's fine. He got it. He got it refixed surgically, and he was fine. Okay, the ends of the joints, the ends of the bones at joints, where the joints meet, or the bones meet at the joint, are covered with a layer of hyaline cartilage. Remember, there's three kinds of cartilage: hyaline, elastic, and fibro. This articular cartilage on the ends of the bones is hyaline cartilage, and it just makes the bone surfaces slippery so the joints move smoothly. If that cartilage wears down, then that leads to arthritis in that joint. A joint, let's look at a picture, a diagram. This is like a cartoon diagram of a synovial joint. The whole joint is surrounded by this joint capsule of connective tissue that just completely surrounds the joint. And the inner lining of that capsule is this synovial membrane, and that synovial membrane secretes this liquid called synovial fluid, and it's a lubricating liquid that, along with the particular cartilage, makes the joint smooth. That's not oil in there. So those lubricating compounds in there are glycoproteins, protein and a carbohydrate together. That make a slimy liquid. When I was used to work in engineering, and there was a guy there, really good, really smart engineer, and he was. I overheard him talking with another guy in the office one day who was complaining about his arthritis. And this engineer guy was saying, you need to eat more butter and fat and stuff because that'll lubricate your joints more. And he was thinking like an engineer, but he didn't know anything about anatomy. That's not oil. You don't have oil in your joints. So it's slimy fluid that has glycoproteins in it, but it's not oil. So eating butter and fat isn't going to lubricate your joints. Some joints have, the knee joints have these extra pads on meniscus pads in between the bones. But that's in addition to the articular cartilage. So it's a thicker pad of cartilage in there that absorbs impact every time you step and come down. Your weight comes down in your knees. It has these meniscus pads that absorb some of that impact, and that cartilage gets damaged, injured sometimes, especially by football players, and if it just wears away, wears down with age, and then it's just articular cartilage on articular cartilage, and when that wears away, it's bone on bone, and then knee transplant, knee replacement, not a transplant. Another thing that some joints, like the knees and shoulders, have these. They're called bursa. It's called a bursa, and it's just a sac, a little sac of that has a liquid in it, and it doesn't do anything really important except it just provides a little bit of it allows these two tissues to slip relative to each other. And in fact, we have this. We just got this last year. It's pretty cool. It's a model of the knee joint. And so here's this tendon is the tendon here. So it's these quad muscles continue off as a tendon. It goes over the front of the knee and attaches on the thumb tibia bone. And the patella, the kneecap, is embedded in that tendon. And so you see as the knee straightens and bends, the patella slides up and down in a groove in the front of the end of the distal end of the femur. And so as that happens, the patella is moving up and down. The skin on top of that, there's a bursa in between the patella and the skin, so that allows the patella to move up and down under your skin without pulling the skin up and down with it. So these two surfaces can move relative to each other because of this bursa, this little sac of fluid there. Just allows a little more freedom of movement between tissues when joints move. You may have heard bursitis. It's inflammation of a bursa. People get it in their shoulders pretty often. And I remember my dad, when I was a kid, my dad, one time somebody he worked with punched him in the arm, punched him in the shoulder. And his shoulder hurt for about a year after that. He never went to a doctor, but he had heard of bursitis. He knew somebody who had a sore shoulder and called it bursitis, so my dad called it bursitis. Who knows what it was, but it eventually went away. But sometimes a bursa, for chronic bursitis, the surgeon will just remove the bursa, just get rid of it. It's not absolutely necessary for anything. Okay, types of these movable synovial joints. They're listed there. So let's look at each one of them for a minute. So ball and socket, like the name implies, it has a ball-shaped head like this humerus, ball of this upper arm bone, the humerus. Fits into a little cup-shaped socket. In this case, that socket is in the scapula of the glenoid cavity. So that forms a ball and socket type joint. Hip joint is similar. The round head of the femur fits into the acetabulum socket in hip joint. It's a nice ball and socket joint. These are the most range of movement. So it can move this way. So it can move this way. It can move this way, and it can even twist in the socket. Hip joint same way. It can move this way, it can move this way, and it can even twist. Then, similar to that is a condylar joint. This is almost the same as a ball and socket joint, except the ball is not a perfectly round ball. It's more of an oval shaped surface. And an example of that is that's what we have at the base of our fingers. The fingers attached to the metacarpals. And so it has almost as much freedom of movement as a ball and socket. Your fingers can go this way, they can go sideways, but they can't twist very well because this is not a perfectly round. It's an oval shape. So it can rotate this way and this way, but it can't twist very well because it's like an oval in an oval instead of a ball shape. Plane joints, also called gliding joints, the surfaces of the bones are almost flat where they meet. The bones of the wrist and ankles, so the carpal bones, those 8 little bones in the wrist, those are pretty flat surfaces in between. And in the between the vertebrae, I got some vertebrae. Some you can see on this is a vertebra. You can see these surfaces are almost flat. Where the discs fit in between the vertebrae, those surfaces are almost flat. Hinge joint, elbow and knee are hinge joints. So you can bend, just bend like this. You can't bend sideways. You can't twist. The elbow joint itself cannot twist. And just do this, just like a door. A door can only do this. Can't do this. The door can't twist on its hinges. Same with the knee. It can only do this. Can't do this very well, and can't twist unless ligaments break. Pivot joint, cylindrical surface rotating within a ring. So the atlas and the axis, the C1 and C2 vertebrae are like that. It allows the head to do this. And also the way the radius bone rubs against a little round notch in the side of the ulna. That's a pivot joint, even though this cylinder-shaped surface on the ulna, it's not completely surrounded on the previous. It's not completely surrounded by bone. It just fits into a rounded notch in the side of the ulna. That's still considered a pivot bone. Saddle joint. It's shaped like a horse saddle. These two surfaces, or think of two Pringles potato chips, one on top of the other. That's what these are shaped like. And so there's pretty much range of movement. It can this one here could slide this way, or this way. And example of that is the base of the thumb metacarpal, where it meets the trapezium purple. That's a saddle joint. First let's these words. Sprain and strain. Common injuries, orthopedic injuries, are strains and sprains. What's the difference? What if you have a strain with a T? What have you injured? A strain is an injury to a muscle or a tendon. Muscle or tendon. What about a sprain with a P? No, a sprain is a ligament. Overstretched a ligament. Not enough to completely tear it, but enough to partially tear it. So if you sprain an ankle, what you've actually done is you've overstretched, you twisted your ankle one way or the other too much, and you've overstretched some of these ligaments. You haven't completely broken any ligaments, but you've torn them enough that they've that there's pain and inflammation for a week or so. But a strain, 3 years ago, I did something stupid. Certainly not the only stupid thing I've done in 3 years. I was having trouble with my truck. It didn't start sometimes. And fixing things, replace the battery, thought it was fixed, and it'd be okay for a few days, and then it would start again. And so one day I got out to come to campus. I had class and got my truck in the key, and nothing happened. It didn't start. So I cussed for a while, and then it's a stick shift. If I could just, the road I live on, a little bit of a hill, if I could just get my truck out onto the road, I could roll it down the hill and start it. And but my driveway is fairly long and it's level. And here I forgot that I'm not 20 years old anymore. I started pushing a 3,000 pound truck up the sandy driveway. And well, I was pushing real hard like this, and I felt something pop in my calf there. I tore my calf muscle. That was a strain. That was a pretty bad strain. I limped around for about 5 or 6 weeks into that healed. It was fine. I was lucky I didn't completely tear my Achilles tendon or something. That could have happened. That would have been worse. So we have built-in reflexes in our tendons. So if you put so much strain, so much tension on a tendon, it's supposed to send a message to your spinal cord that sends a message back to that muscle that tells that muscle stop contracting because you're going to hurt yourself. But it doesn't always work. Your muscles are strong enough that they can hurt themselves. Abuse yourself, like by pushing a truck or something. Okay, so let's go through these types of joint movements real fast, and then we'll break. Okay, so first, extension and flexion of a joint. Flexion just means bending. So flex my knee, it just means I bend it. Extend it means straightening it. Some joints, like my wrist, I can flex it, and I can extend it, and I can go beyond straight, hyper extend it. Most joints, like my knees and elbows, I can't hyper extend unless I put something, break something. Abduction and adduction. If someone is abducted, it means he's been taken away, right? So abduct, the BD, abduct is a limb means to move it away from the body. Abducting my arm. Adducting with 2 Ds is the opposite, towards my body. Dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, those words only can be used for the feet. Because the word plantar means toward the bottom of the foot. So in this case, usually we'll talk about joints. One way is flexion and the other way is extension. But if we're talking about the ankle, down is flexion and up is flexion. So I don't know who invited that, but dorsiflexion just means bending down at the ankle. I'm sorry, plantar flexion is bending down at the ankle. Dorsiflexion is bending the foot up at the ankle. Plantar flexion, dorsiflexion. Some people get warts on the bottom of their feet, and they're called plantar warts. Because they're on the bottom of the feet. Circumduction just means moving that body part to trace out a circle. The circumduction. My arm could use my foot. Clockwise with your foot and counterclockwise with your arm. hard to do. Rotation, some joints can rotate, like the, probably have the ball and socket here, I can rotate. So lateral, medial, so away from the center line and toward the center line. Supination and pronation. Supinate, those words, if they are applied to your whole person's whole body, supine means lying face up, prone means lying face down, but if we're referring to the hands, supine means palms up, prone is palm down. Eversion and inversion, those are used for the ankles or the foot. So inversion means just bending the one foot toward the other foot, bending it medially, and eversion is the other way. If you do that too far, you'll sprain that joint. Protraction, retraction, that can refer to the head. My whole head forward and backward, or just my jaw. You can use that for the jaw. Move your mandible forward and backwards. Elevation and depression of the shoulders. Raising is elevation, depression is lowering. And this last one, opposition. Humans, unlike other animals who have, other animals like the possums and raccoons, their front paws look kind of like hands, but they can't do this. They don't have an opposable thumb like humans have. So opposition just means you can touch each of your four fingers. Humans can do that, chimpanzees, but not many other animals can do that. Okay. Any questions about joints? Take a break. Brought a bunch of stuff. I got a model of the shoulder here too. It has the ball and socket joint and also the AC joint above it. Anybody wants to look at this stuff? At break time, you're welcome.
Injury.
The high ankle sprain.
It was back to start for bad boys. They showed in a different angle just so you could see it.
I don't know if I want to see that.
Yeah. He took it like a champ, and like he won't even cry. I've been bawling.
Oh yeah.
Crying
Yes,
my eyeballs out.
what else did I hear? Somebody, I think it was a football player who ruptured his Achilles tendon.
During hotel.
And they said he was out for the season.
That looked painful.
Yeah.
Have you go to the lab or do tonight? You go to do it?
No.
Okay.
I refilled it. Everybody said.
Everybody.
Who's not here? Amy, Aisha. Aisha's not here. What? She hasn't been here, has she? I don't remember seeing her. Tatum. Oh, yeah, Tatum. Tatum. David. Regina is here. Amy. Autumn. Barbara. And Cassie. Okay. Sarah's not here. Oh, there you are. Carson. Jamie, right? Andy and Joshua. Okay, well, we're having an exam next week, and I haven't made the exam yet. I don't use the same exam every year like some instructors, but I have last year's exam, and thought I'd just go through what's on here, to give you an idea what to expect from next week. It'll be similar. I might reuse some of these questions. So this is chapter 6, 7, and 8. Chapter 6 is general information about bone tissue. Chapter 7 and 8 are more about this. The names and features of the individual bones of the axial and appendicular to the skeleton. So we should know generally the functions of the skeletal system. So supporting and protecting parts of the body, protecting a lot of the organs, heart and lungs and brain, and surrounded by bones and protected. Storing minerals, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium. So the extracellular matrix of bones is made of mostly calcium phosphate. That's the white hard mineral, also called hydroxyapatite. And so if your cells of your body need calcium or some mineral that's in that extracellular matrix, and you're not getting it from your diet today, then the minerals from your bones can be. What do we have stored in the medullary cavity of hollow bones? yellow marrow, right? And that's fat, like adipose tissue. We store fat in the hollow spaces, the medullary cavity of hollow bones, most of the long bones. So what do we have in the hollow spaces in the spongy bone? That's the other kind of red marrow. Right? And what goes on in the red marrow? Making new blood cells, red blood cells and the different kinds of white blood cells. All originate in the red marrow, which is in the hollow spaces in the spongy bone. Need to know the parts of a long bone. The diaphysis, the epiphysis, the metaphysis, the medullary cavity, the periosteum, the epiphyseal plates or lobe plates. Where is the compact bone and the spongy bone? Doesn't know all that stuff. It's on the PowerPoint. That's all shown on one diagram. I think on the PowerPoint, and it's on here. So make sure you review that. Make sure you know where all those parts are. The diaphysis, metaphysis, epiphysis, medullary cavity, periosteum, spongy, and compact bone. Growth plates or epiphyseal plates. What else is on the bone? The articular cartilage. So types of there's four types of bones, four types of cells in bone tissue that we learned. There's the osteoblasts and osteoclasts. The word blast, if a cell is called a blast, then that's a cell that produces something. In this case, the osteoblasts produce the extracellular matrix of the bone. They produce the white mineral and also the collagen fibers. Osteoclasts, with a C, do the opposite. They break down that tissue. So those function in the bone remodeling, which is another concept you need to know about, bone remodeling, this constant, ongoing, lifelong process in which your bone tissue is being broken down and rebuilt constantly. Broken down by osteoclasts and rebuilt by osteoblasts. Osteocytes are the regular bone cells that carry out the daily metabolism of bone tissue. And also, what are the genetic cells? Osteogenetic cells, the ones that mature into osteoblasts. But the important ones are the osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and osteocytes. Okay, the two kinds of bone formation or ossification: endochondral and intramembranous. Intramembranous. You know what those mean? Endochondral and intramembranous. Endochondral. What does chondral mean? CHONDR. Chondra means cartilage. Chondra, in a word, that has something, that means it has something to do with cartilage. So, chondro or chondro means cartilage. So endochondral ossification, that's just a bone that starts out as cartilage, shaped like a bone, and then it hardens into bone. That hardening is called calcification or mineralization or ossification. And that's how bones are formed in an embryo and fetus that's developing. Endochondral ossification. And the other kind is intramembranous. Intra means within. So it's helpful to learn what these prefixes mean. Inter means between. Intra means within. One thing I ever gave you guys, I got a sheet, which is a list of prefixes and Latin roots that are in a lot of these words. Did I ever give you that? I'll try to write that down and remember to bring that next time. It's really helpful to learn stuff like that. I was lucky. I took Latin in high school. I had 2 years of Latin. That's really helpful in figuring out what these words mean, even if I've never seen them before. I know what the Latin roots mean. So intramembranous means intramembranous ossification means bones forming in a membrane. Membrane, remember, is a thin, flat tissue. So that's how the thin, flat bones form. Like this, these cranial bones were just membranes in this shape, and within those membranes, bone tissue was produced. And so we end up with these thin, flat bones. Intramembranous ossification is also how bones get thicker as they grow. Because the periosteum, connective tissue that covers the bone, that's a membrane that produces more bone tissue onto the surface that's already there, and it makes the bones get thicker. Growing child. Hormones that affect calcium homeostasis, or maintaining the right amount of calcium in the blood. There's 3 hormones involved. More directly, those are involved in growth, but growth of bones. But just talking about calcium levels in the blood right now. What is it? There's calcitonin and calcitriol. So they both have calci in their names, so that's helpful. Calcitonin and calcitriol, and the third one, EPH, parathyroid hormone. PTH and calcitriol are released when the calcium in the blood is low, not enough calcium. So the parathyroid glands are here on the back of the thyroid glands. So when you have too little calcium in your blood, these glands release this hormone PTH, which causes during the bone remodeling that's always going on, it causes more calcium taken out of the bones and being put back in. So that calcium is added to the blood. That's one way of increasing the calcium in the blood. The other way, PTH causes this other hormone, calcitriol, to be released by the kidney into the blood, and that causes more calcium to be absorbed from the food you're digesting, or more of that calcium in your blood. Calcitriol is a form of vitamin D. So that's another way of increasing the calcium in your blood, absorbing it from the food you're digesting into your blood. Then the third hormone, calcitonin, it does the opposite. When you have too much calcium in your blood, more than you need, calcitonin is released from the pituitary gland. Calcitonin causes during bone remodeling to put more calcium into the bones to be taken out, storing extra calcium in your bone tissue. It also causes the kidney to put more calcium in the urine, to get rid of them that way also. I guess what two minerals are needed in large quantities to take in your diet when you're growing to develop bones, for your bones to grow? What two minerals or elements do you think? What two elements make up most of the extracellular matrix of bone tissue? What is that white stuff? What's this stuff made out of? Calcium and phosphorus. This white stuff is mostly calcium phosphate. That's also called hydroxyapatite. So this is mostly made of calcium and phosphorus. So as you're growing, you better be eating a lot of calcium and phosphorus. Mostly you have to worry about calcium because it's almost impossible to not get enough phosphorus. Every kind of food is full of phosphorus. I shouldn't say that. Not every kind of food, but it's hard not to get enough phosphorus. What are the little bony fragments that make up spongy bone? What are they called? The spongy bone is made up of a bunch of little tiny pieces of bone fused together with hollow spaces in between. What are those little bony pieces called? There's a piece for that. No. Back to you, Lee. Back to Lee. This is another one of those words. Without the E on the end is trabecula is singular. Trabeculae with the AE is plural. The spongy bone is made up of many trabeculae fused together with hollow spaces in between. And what's in the hollow spaces? Spongy bone. Red bone marrow, red marrow is. And that's where the blood cells are made. What does a compound fracture have that a simple fracture does not have? What does compound fracture mean? What's that mean? Can you tell by looking at me if I have one? If I was naked and I said I have a compound fracture, could you tell me something? It just means there's an open wound associated with it. An open wound at the fracture. Doesn't necessarily mean the bone's sticking out. It just means that there's an open wound exposing the bone. And could be caused by when the bone fractures, the jagged edge of a bone would go through from the inside out. Or it could be that some object that caused the fracture, there was some impact of some object that hit the bone and cut through the other tissues, the skin and muscle, and then into the bone and broke the bone. So either way, there's an open wound at the fracture. That's why it's also called an open fracture. Compound or open fracture means something. Simple or closed fracture just means there's no open wound with the fracture. You guys ever fracture a toe? It's done. But I've done a couple times. It's such a small body part; it can really hurt a lot. What do they go to the hospital, go to the ER for that? So they fix it up. What do they do? They call it a buddy taping, right? Take it to the one next to it. It doesn't help much. It's still going to hurt for weeks. I used to go to a podiatrist, a foot specialist with having problems, and he told me, he's a foot specialist, and he told me that he was working in his yard one time, and he dropped a cinder block on his toe, just crushed the bone, just broke into a bunch of pieces, one of his big toe bones. And he said, all I can do is tape it up. I hope for the best. You don't put a cast on it or anything. You know that there are artificial ankle joints now. My oldest sister, I never heard of this until my oldest sister has had both ankles replaced. Artificial ankles. She had arthritis in her ankles so bad. Both of them done. My mom's got both knees. My older brothers have both hips. And I still don't have one. I can't complain about those genes. I didn't get all the good genes, but I don't have crippling arthritis. Well, they need to know that these terms or features, or they're called markings on bones. The features of bones, like um, oh, like the term for a hole through a bone, like that. What's the general term for a hole? Call a hole. It's called a foramen. A hole is a foramen. What's this one called? This big one. Foramen. Oh, the foramen magnum. Magnum. Where magnum means large. Oh, what other ones we need? I don't know. A process, of course. Process just means a bony process. It means part of the bone sticking out. So, well, here's on this model of, you can see on this guy. On the scapula, there's a couple of them. Big one, big process sticking out here. The acromion process. Another one, meatus. Meatus is just a funnel into a bone. The only one we need to know, the only meatus that we care about is the external auditory meatus, which is just the ear hole. So the eardrum would be back in there. Before I start asking about any particular bones of interest. Well, how about the as a fractured bone heals, there are 4 types of tissues at the fracture that will appear, one after another until the bone is finally healed. So what's the first thing that's at the fracture? So if this is my femur, I've got a fracture here. What's the first thing? The first kind of stuff that's going to accumulate here? Blood, right? What's a term for an accumulation of blood, or a big clot of blood like that? Hematoma. Yeah, hematoma just means a accumulation of blood. So that's the first thing. It's called a fracture hematoma. It'll just be surrounded by a big blood clot. Then what will be the next kind of tissue that'll form here? Think of endochondral ossification. Cartilage. That's called a fibrocartilage. Cartilage callus. But it's just a cartilage will form here and start to use the fracture together. And that cartilage will be replaced by, what do you think is the next kind of tissue? Spongy bones. So now this is all going to be spongy bone. that will be, finally that will be replaced by, what's the other kind of bone? What's the outside layer of bone? Compact. So this spongy bone will be replaced by compact bone. And now it's back to full strength. Beautiful picture. Yeah. So hematoma, cartilage, spongy bone, and compact bone. Um, Okay, now a bunch of questions on here about individual bones and their names and business stuff. So, um, um, oh, the different shapes of bones, long, short, flat, irregular, and sesamoid. Everybody know what those mean? Long bones are the arm and leg and finger bones. Flat bones are the cranium, the scapula, the ribs, and just the hip bones. The short bones are just the bones that are not as long as they are thick or wide. So that's the carpal, the wrist bones, and some of the tarsal ankle bones. Irregular is just anything that's doesn't have any kind of regular shape. It's not long or short or flat. It's just irregular. So vertebrae are a good example. Weird shapes. And the sesamoid, uh, that means shaped like a sesame seed. So that's what are the sesamoid bones? The patella. Yeah. Heard of a dislocated patella? That's happened. I saw one of those once. Um, I used to be a certified EMT a long time ago, and uh, just for experience, I would. Uh, an EMT can be paid. They'll pay you $50 or something to just be at a soccer game, just in case somebody gets injured. And so I used to do that sometimes. And I was at a women's league soccer game once, and um, so there was a collision. These young ladies ran into each other and were on the ground, and one of them didn't get up. She was sitting there with her knee bent in front of her, and she wasn't getting up. So I started to run out on the field for her, and I got 20 feet from her. She said, "Stay away! Don't touch me." And as I got closer, I could see that there was her kneecap was not where it's supposed to be. It was over here, sticking out the side. There's a bump there, and I never even heard of this. I don't know. What am I going to do about that? But she said, no, no, don't touch me. This happened before. She straightened her leg a little bit, but then she took her hand and pushed it right back into its groove. And she sat there for a couple more minutes. She got up, was limping a little bit, then she went on playing. And I thought, oh, that's one tough lady. Okay, what bone of the axial skeleton? Axial is the head, neck, and which bone does not articulate with any other bone? Hyoid. The hyoid. That little horseshoe-shaped bone here in front of the neck. This guy. It's just held on here by wire, but it does not have a joint where it's attached to any other bone. It's just held in place by muscles. The thoracic cage. What bones make up the thoracic cage? What structures make up the thoracic cage? The ribs. Thoracic means chest, right? So the ribs and what else? The sternum, breastbone, and what about in back? Vertebrae. Yeah, and we could also say the costal cartilages. They're part of the ribs, but the costal cartilages. So they have these bones all surround the heart and lungs, form what we call the thoracic cage. What bones make up the pelvis? Yeah, well, the coccyx is the tailbone. Yeah, so it's one of them. The pelvis is these bones here that the vertebral column sits on top of, and the legs are attached to. So what's there? The left and right hip bones are coxbones. And what's in between them back here? Big triangle shape bone. The bone above the coccyx, above the tailbone. What's that called? I need to know this. It's the sacrum. Yeah, the left and right hip bones, or coxa, C-O-X-A, is the name for hip bones. And then the sacrum is in between them. And then below the sacrum is the tailbone, or coccyx. How many phalanges do you have in one hand? A phalanx, singular has an X on the end. A phalanx is a finger bone. So how many do you have in each finger? You should be able to count them. 14, right? So 3 in these 4 fingers, but only 2 in the thumb. It's a total of 14. What about how many phalanges in each foot? Same number, 14. Because the big toe has only has only 2. The other 4 toes have 3, just like your hands. So your big toe is like your thumb. There's only 2 phalanges. So a total of 56 in the whole body. How many carpals? We learned the names of them, right? Scaphoid, lunate, spectrum, pisiform, trapezium, trapezoid, capitally cannon. You know all of those? How many metacarpals in one hand? One per finger, right? So those are the hand bones between the wrist and the finger. So there's 5 of them. Okay, why are you guys are doing things? How many parcel bones? Those are the ankle bones, right?
7.
We learned that there's 7, right? Here's a foot. What's the one on top called? The top one? I remember because the top one, I think of it as the tall one. And it's called the talus. T-A-L-U-S. What's the big heel bone called? Calcaneus. And right in front of the talus is the naviculus, and then in front of that is the 3 cuneiform bones, the medial, intermediate, lateral, cuneiform bones, all in a row. And lateral to the lateral, the third cuneiform is the cuboid. It's kind of box shaped like a T. Then in front of those are the metatarsals. The 7 parcels, 8 carpals in the wrist, 7 parcels in the ankle, including the heel bone. Very into this. What's the largest bone? The femur, the thigh bone, right? Which is the weight-bearing bone of the lower leg? What are the 2 lower leg bones called? Yeah, just remember tibia and fibula. Which one is the big one that bears the weight? Tibia or fibula? Tibia. Tibia is the big one. Fibula is the skinny one. It doesn't bear any weight. There you go. How many bones in Now, how many vertebrae? Seven or 15. How many of each? How many cervical, how many thoracic, and how many lumbar? You need to know that. How did we say, remember that? 7, 12, and 5, the times that some people eat. Maybe people on leave at the Beaver eat their meals at those times. 7, 12, and 5. 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar. What if the thoracic ones have that the others don't have? The thoracic vertebrae. What's different about the thoracic from the cervical? They have ribs attached. You all know that, right? So, how many pairs of ribs? We have 5. Thoracic, 12 thoracic. Do women and men have different number of ribs? I actually have to see by the time the other one. What the Bible says. What the God took a rib from Adam and made a woman. What two bones form the zygomatic arch? Everybody know what the zygomatic arch is, or you have one? Or you have 2 or 3, or I have 2. That's the cheek of the arch. These arches of bone here. One of them is the temporal. That's the one, the posterior one. What's the one in front here? Zygomatic. The zygomatic bone and the temporal bone have these processes that come together and meet and form the zygomatic arch. Yeah. I brought these. I got 3 vertebrae here. I got a big one, and a medium-sized one, and a smaller one. Can you tell me which is which? Which is thoracic? Which is cervical? Which is lumbar? But what about the big one, the biggest one? Lumbar, right? And what about the smallest one? Cervical and thoracic would be the intermediate or medium-sized one. They start out small at the top and they get bigger toward the bottom. The farther they are down, the more weight there is above them to support, so they're bigger and stronger lower down. What if I would ask you what bone articulates with the medial end of the clavicle? Medial end of the clavicle. You can maybe see on the exam. If he's not in here, you can maybe feel it on yourself. So, medial end of the clavicle. This is the clavicle, right? Medial end is here. What's that attached to? Sternum, right? The sternum. More specifically, the upper part of the sternum is called the manubrium. Manubrium, right? So that's where it's attached. What do we call these ribs that have their costal cartilages go straight across to the sternum? Sorry, I can't. We're all wearing masks. I know. What is it? No, the floating ribs are the ones that don't come straight across. They're the floating rib, or these are the false ribs. Thanks. The floating ribs are the two bottom ones, right? They don't attach to anything. But these up here that have their costal cartilages that come straight from the rib to the sternum, those are the true ribs. 7 true ribs. And the rest are, the other 5 are false ribs, which includes the 2 floating ribs. But these number 8, 9, and 10 have their cartilages come up and attach to the number 7 cartilage instead of them going straight across and attaching directly to the sternum. Yeah. What two bones articulate at the shoulder joint? Two bones form the shoulder joint. The humerus here. And so what does this articulate with at the shoulder? The shoulder blade. What's the name for the shoulder blade bone? Scapula. You guys Catholic, you know what a scapula is in the Catholics? I grew up Catholic, and scapula is this thing that's like 2 strings, and on the front and back, it has a little card with a picture of Jesus or something on it. So you wear it over your neck and have some religious symbolism. If I asked what bone articulates with both hip bones and the coccyx and the L5 vertebra. So this bone, so both hips, the L5 vertebra, and the coccyx, they all touch the sacrum, the triangle bone. What if I had asked what bone articulates with the L1 vertebra and the L3 vertebra? L2, because it's in between. I asked what bone articulates with 2 bones. I'm asking what's in between those 2 bones. Right? So there might be some questions like that. What articulates with these 2 other bones? Which bones articulate with teeth? The mandible and the mandible has the lower teeth. What bone has the upper teeth? The left and right maxilla. There's only one mandible. That's all one bone. There's a left and right maxilla. Hey, we're about out of time. Abnormal lateral curvature of the spinal column. What's that called? Scoliosis. So lateral means left or right, not front or back. So that's called scoliosis. Okay, I think it covers about everything. We're about to give you an idea what to expect. I'll be here next week. I'll be here 5. Or next door. They're still singing in here. Having a choir practice. They're doing here today. What time they do that. So if anybody wants to come at 5, so I'll be doing probably simply the same thing tonight. But if you want to do that again right before the test, I'll be here. I think we're done.
Presentation on the first ballot.
Yeah, it'd be fine. I don't think I've ever had a student do that.
Okay.
Yeah, Jamie Mort is here today, right?
What?
Jamie Mort is here today. Because I didn't hear you call her name. Jayme.
Yeah, she's here, right?
Okay, yeah, she's
Yeah, I
here.
got you. I saw you. I didn't call your name.
Have a good one. See you next week.
See ya.
Those wrist. Kidding. No, I see.
Oh, I just.
That's fine.
Hey, look, I'm a director of
On here, I'm trying to look in that picture. The wristbands.
Yeah.
Um,
But you still start on the thumb side.
Let me know when y'all ready to miss the
So
Ah.
yeah, this is the scaffold.
Okay.
That long one.
Okay.
Scaffold is when they press them, and this is a fuzzy form on top.
That's what, okay. So that's what I was wondering. So I thought there was it's fused on here,
Yeah, that's
but it's
two
not
bonds.
actually. Okay, so it's not actually fused. Okay, gotcha.
And then start over again on the side. So the second row, so that would be fusing trapezoid, tapestry, Hamley. Hamley has that hook sticking out.
Okay. Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's kind of hard looking at the picture.
This time, I'm trying to do a colony, you go to Walmart and buy a pretty nice skeleton.
Right, yeah.
They might not have the great purple bones, but
Right.
some of them are pretty good. Even at Dollar Tree, they got 4 little skeletons for $1.
Oh, okay.
And some, I've used them on websites.
That's pretty cool. I never really thought about that, to be honest with you. Okay. Awesome. Appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah.
You, for this tonight or tomorrow?